Well, if you're like me, it's been a roller coaster of an early season for fantasy owners, but also several players. Here's a look at the top performers so far through Sunday. Dak Prescott's rally against the Ravens, his attempt putting him at 33 fantasy points in a loss. Saquon Barkley, 32, as well as Dallas Goedert getting some tight end action, especially during a season where the production's been a little low. 49ers wide receiver Jauan Jennings with a 3-touchdown outing, but ended in a loss. Just some of the performances that have left some questions for several fantasy owners. Expect the unexpected as we welcome in CBS Sports fantasy sports writer Heath Cummings. And I'm not sure anyone coming into the season maybe saw the change at quarterback coming for the Panthers, at least this early into the season. But Heath, here we are, and perhaps it might be the change that Carolina needed with Bryce Young to the side and 14-year NFL vet Andy Dalton now under center and leading the Panthers to their first win of the year, by the way. Heath, was this performance maybe a one-off, or can fantasy managers maybe bank on Dalton to resurrect the Panthers and their playmakers?
So a little bit of both. I don't think you should count on Andy Dalton to throw 3 touchdown passes every week, but he is a professional NFL quarterback, and he came in and ran a professional NFL offense, and the first time we've seen that in Carolina in quite some time. We knew Diontae Johnson was still good at getting open, running routes. Now he was rewarded with a football and actually somewhere in his vicinity. Diontae Johnson now someone I think you can trust as a number 3 wide receiver. And if this connection grows with Dalton, we may even see Diontae move back into that wide receiver 2 territory. Chuba Hubbard, another guy who we saw success from last year and then got off at the start of this year, and there was absolutely no continuity to the offense. They couldn't get anything going. He's a monster in Dalton's first game. A little bit different than Diontae Johnson because we've got Jonathan Brooks coming. And that's kind of maybe the hidden story here is Jonathan Brooks was my favorite running back in this draft class, and we had to wait for him to get off the pup, still recovering from that ACL. But I do think that if Andy Dalton's still the quarterback when he gets here, he could absolutely be a top 12 running back for fantasy football purposes.
Hey, you talk about connections that are growing. I want to talk about another team because Malik Nabers continues to strengthen those Rookie of the Year odds. Now 3 games looking to be Daniel Jones' go-to guy. He's officially moved into a weekly must-start role. I'm asking you, has he, despite maybe looking at some of Jones' struggles he might deal with and could continue to deal with?
And I was one of those guys who doubted whether or not Malik Nabers could overcome Daniel Jones, and he has completely proven that he can. You know, the first 2 weeks of the season, we got a bit of a mixed bag. He was just so-so against the Minnesota Vikings. We didn't know what to make of their defense. He was awesome against the Washington Commanders. We knew they were the worst secondary in the NFL. So coming into this Cleveland game, it was kind of a prove-it game. And something else happened. We've kind of learned that the Minnesota Vikings defense is, in fact, awesome. So when he put up this production, and in particular, a couple of the highlight real catches from Malik Nabers, he can make up from some of the deficiencies of Daniel Jones. I just plan on ranking Malik Nabers as a top 12 wide receiver each and every week. Don't worry about the matchups.
Don't worry about the matchups. Put them in your starting slot. But hey, Heath, remember I said expect the unexpected. Well, let's talk about what you just mentioned, because who expected Brian Flores, this Brian Flores-led Vikings defense, to be one of the best units in the league through 3 weeks? Dominated the Giants, like you mentioned, in week 1. Held the 49ers to 7 points through 3 quarters last week. And then they follow up completely shutting out C.J. Stroud and the Texans in the first half in week 3. Is this Vikings defense maybe becoming a matchup to start avoiding going forward?
Well, they're kind of going up levels each week. Like, right? It's one thing to do it against Daniel Jones. It's another thing to do it against Brock Purdy, and then to do it against C.J. Stroud. They've now allowed 30 points in 3 weeks. Those 3 quarterbacks have combined for 2 passing touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and 15 sacks taken. I do not want to start quarterbacks against the Minnesota Vikings. That includes Jordan Love if he makes his return in week 4, and I certainly am not too excited about Aaron Rodgers in a couple of weeks either.
I know we're not really talking waiver wire right now, but if just so happens the Vikings are available, I think this is your note to go grab them right now. I would expect them. They're gone on everybody's, fantasy leagues. But all right, well, if outcome was different in this game, Heath, I probably would have led into no CMC, no Kittle, no Debo, no problem for the 49ers. Well, at least offensively, it wasn't really a problem because that former 7th-round pick, Jauan Jennings, had himself a day. It was almost reminiscent of his Super Bowl outing where he should have won MVP in my biased opinion, but I digress. But just as that game, being honest here, ended in a loss, as did week through falling to the Rams in comeback fashion. But just considering the 49ers and their weapons, because we know that Kyle Shanahan can use a lot of those pieces, and considering their timelines to return, do you think Jennings is a must-add for fantasy owners, or do you see his production maybe changing down the line?
I definitely think we're going to see his production changing down the line. Listen, this is a guy who scored 51.5 fantasy points last year, scored 46.5 today. That's not going to be happening again. It'd be surprising if he scored half of what he scored again today. But we don't know when Kittle's coming back. We don't know when Debo's coming back. We know McCaffrey's not coming back anytime soon. Jennings still just 28% rostered. And look at this graphic. Yes, it's absolutely ridiculous. That smile, that big smile on his face, he earned every bit of it. I think we're probably going to view him as a boom bust number 3 wide receiver next week. But again, 26% rostered in CBS fantasy leagues right now. He should be added and rostered across the board, and he's probably going to be started. Just don't be too surprised if he disappoints.
Okay, that 46 you see in the red box, don't expect that going forward every week, especially considering the 49ers options on offense. Okay, well, injuries didn't really seem maybe like a big problem for the 49ers, but they actually might be for the Dolphins, because we know Tua is on the IR, but then they lost backup quarterback Skylar Thompson during Sunday's game against the Seahawks, and they were down to their third-string quarterback Tim Boyle. Now, what does this mean for the Dolphins playmakers going forward? Should we proceed with caution, because we still got guys like Tyreek, we still got Waddle? What should we do going forward?
Yeah, and I don't want you to think that I'm saying that you must sit Devon Achane or Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle, but I also wouldn't call them must starts for as long as Tua is out. I've heard plenty over the last couple of years about how Tua is a system quarterback, and it's just the system that's so good. Well, that system doesn't look very good without him, and we've seen this multiple times when Tua has gone down. I'm going to view Tyreek as a number 2 wide receiver next week. I'm going to view Achane as a number 2 running back. There's still big time upside if things go right, but this offense just did not look functional at all. The one guy I'm definitely not starting, Jalen Waddle, put him on your bench. Don't drop him. It's going to be a couple of rough weeks most likely, because what we've seen in the past when there's been a backup quarterback, and it didn't happen today, generally Tua still gets his, still in that 10 to 15 fantasy point range. You can feel okay about starting, still has the big time upside. Waddle has struggled mightily when Tua Tagovailoa has been out, and so I will not be starting on. And Tyreek just kind of in that number 2 area where if you have 2 guys better, don't feel bad about sitting them.
Don't feel bad. It's crazy to believe, because I think I would always maybe feel bad about sitting Tyreek. Yeah. I feel like that's the craziest idea, but considering the unlucky situation that Miami's going through, might be worth considering. All right, Heath, as always, we appreciate you stopping by. Thanks for the insight.